Welcome back, everyone, to our webinar series, Embracing Change. We've got Sarah in today. She normally lives in Australia and is now joining us from Croatia. Thank you very much, Sarah, for taking the time out of your wonderful holiday in Europe. And so thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So when we spoke last time, I was sharing a little bit about my experience at the UBS Next Gen Academy event and speaking about, what the Next Gen is really aspiring to in terms of, how they would like to see the future and what they would like to create. And obviously co-create is very important, right? How do they move forward and co-create in line with the older gen, but in line with their own values and their own principles, right? Without that, blame, shame, occurring. So let's use that as a base. And I know what we just spoke about before we began was, you said, when there's tension, there's possibility, right? When there's tension, there's opportunity, right? And I always say, people say, oh, stress is bad. And I say, well, actually stress is where all innovation, all creativity, and all progress occurs. It's our inability to de-stress. And I think here, the tension is great because that creates yumminess and newness, but it's our ability to manage or to work through or move through that tension. And of course, you're the specialist in love. So we'd like to bring in that concept of values, money, family, and how love can take us sometimes to the two ends that doesn't work, and at the same time, a beautiful way forward. So maybe give a little bit of background of why to bring this topic up, just a short brief, and then let's get right into it.
Yes, well, I spent many years training with a couple of Chinese masters and learning about energy originally. And I did that because I realized that I didn't understand life. I was very well educated. I came out of one of the best universities in the world, quite incapable really of doing anything. I really realized that when my sister died, my younger sister died when I was 30, and I was very unprepared. And it's like I couldn't make out what life was really about. And I knew that I needed to learn something. So I did the opposite of what most of my peers did in many ways. I just dived into that and spent years learning that. I went away from the mainstream very much to do that. And then gradually came back and started learning about money and business and all the things that make life work, but being able to, and relationships, of course, and being able to do that in a context of having learned a completely different approach. So I missed a lot of what everybody else was doing, but when I did come back to it much later, it was different. And the other thing that I think is important in here, and look, this is very out there. For some people, it might seem really weird, but I don't care because it's what happened. When I was at a particularly difficult stage of my life financially, where a business that I had started really with my heart, like I started it because I really cared about it, was about health and well-being, and it was for bankers and really busy, stressed people in London. And it failed in the recession. And I had no money, and I was just in that, I had nothing to do. And I found myself in this very weird and unusual experience of writing a message from money. It was like money, whatever you take that to be, was talking to me through my pen. And look, this wasn't my own writing. It wasn't my own words. It was a pure, you can call it automatic writing or whatever you like. But that's what happened to me. And what it said was unbelievably beautiful. And it started off by saying, I would like to tell you to love me. And it talked about how money's an energy, and it's a very beautiful energy, and went on. And I started writing more and more messages from money like that because it was so fascinating. And I started to learn a completely different understanding of what this energy of money is that flows through business and commerce. And I started to realize that there was a way, if we had a different understanding of it, that was actually connected with love, which is so unusual to connect money and love. If we do that, we can actually resolve lots of these tensions of exactly what you were talking about. different generations. And what the book was about, I turned it into a book. It's really about our relationship with money. But what it turned into is learning about our relationship with pretty much anything and anybody and life. And so in a way, what I've learned is a way of seeing through an energy and relationship and love lens into business and life and family, because most of my clients spend a lot of time dealing with family stuff. When the family things go wrong, that's so in your face, like you have to deal with it. And so we're constantly blending these topics.
So we're going to share that, remember the YouTube video on that conversation about love and money.
That was the very first message.
Yes.
Yes, a little video that's the very first message I wrote for money, and it is very beautiful.
So we're going to share that with the webinar. So don't worry, everybody will get to experience that download or auto writing, whatever you want to call it. So thank you for that, from all of us who are going to listen. We truly are grateful for that sharing. So so maybe we look at the pendulum, right? So we've got two ends. If we always, I've written a book on 4 Steps to Flow, which talks about living a meaningful life, head and heart united, right? And when we go too head or we go too heart, we end up in two extremes. So from your experience, what are you seeing, and what do you recommend, or tell us how are you approaching this space?
Well, yeah, if we start from too head and too heart, and it does tend to go that way, that people are too heady. I see that especially a lot in business, that people try to work everything out with their head. And they use their head to refer back to past experience all the time, which is very sensible at a certain level, but it's very difficult to bring your personal values into that very strongly, I think. And I often see that people sacrifice a lot of what's really important for them because their head makes decisions that are rational, they're quite linear, they make sense at a certain level, but they don't always make sense at the level of who you are as a human being, as a full human being, and they don't make sense in terms of your family and your close relationships. They don't make sense actually in terms of love. But then you get the other extreme, and we see this more and more, especially typically, but not only, amongst women or people who've done a lot of personal development in younger generation, where it's all about love and the heart is central, but they abandon very easily the rational and the linear and just the sensible, downright, the common sense stuff that actually works, and also experience.
Yes.
And then the two fight. They just fight because it's like, no, I'm right. I know what I'm doing. I've got all this data to support it. This is the right thing. But that's not right. Dad, mom, whatever, that isn't right. Can't you see the world has changed, or we need to do things differently now? But the evidence supports the rational because that's the lens that one person comes from. The feeling supports the heart. It feels right. And it must feel right. If we don't feel right as human beings, life is really horrible.
Yeah.
So they're both right, but they don't meet. And to me, this is the interesting stuff in life always, where you've got two rights, but they don't meet with each other.
Yeah.
If you've got a right and a wrong, that's a different issue. We don't need to talk about that. But the head really is important, because otherwise we make irrational, stupid decisions. The heart really is important because otherwise we disrespect the essence of life.
Yeah, the core. Yeah.
And we make bad decisions. We make unwise decisions. They might be good, but unwise. Yeah. And that's exactly how we are where we are in terms of many of the topics that are being discussed today. And what I find in that situation is that the first thing that's important is to acknowledge both, rather than make yourself right and the other person wrong, which is extremely tempting. And I have to say, even amongst those of us who know this very well, it's really tempting to get onto my high ground. I'm right and you're wrong. I know more about this than you do. I'm more experienced than you do. And that can be the younger generation to the older generation, like, you don't know what you're talking about anymore. You're too old, you're out of touch, or it can be the other way. It really doesn't matter. But that's the temptation. There's a beautiful thing that I heard Bruce Lipton, the scientist, say once at a talk. He's very geeky, very scientific type of guy. But his partner was on the stage as well. And they talked about how it's better to love than to be right. It's quite a challenging thing to be told. And I've struggled with it, but it's better to love than to be right. This is where I think love comes in, that there is a place where the head and the heart can actually meet and work together.
Yeah.
And that place can't happen without love. If you don't bring love into it, you will always want to be right. Whether your heart is right or your head is right, there will be a piece of you that is trying to maintain the upper hand or keep control. It's often about control. But when you bring love in, everything softens, and you actually have to include both perspectives. You can't reject something if you love, you include. And then what happens is it becomes a very dynamic, very fertile ground for growing new things that work better. Because if you can bring the heart and the head together, and if you can bring the values that we stand for now that perhaps we didn't stand for so strongly in previous generations, like the protection and regeneration of nature, the support of healthy, thriving human beings, and a thriving economy for all, not just for the few. These kinds of things, they obviously make sense to us as human beings. If you can bring that together with kind of clear-headed success so that you actually achieve it rather than just dream about it, that just is the answer. It satisfies everybody. So to me, it's in there. It's where we say, we take that moment to say love is more important. And this is where family is beautiful, because love is the first thing in family. It is the place where we express love most closely. If we can say, oh, it's really important for me to approach this with love, to include me and my views and my experience, and to include you with your views and your experience. And how do we create something out of that that is even better than either of us knows at this point? I think that that's the very creative ground.
I'm hearing a few things. So one is, I was told by one of my masters before, what would love do now? So I think that whole, he'd say, whenever you enter a room or you enter a situation, ask yourself, what would love do now? And what I'm hearing is that love is the dissolver of the ego of wanting control or being right. This is what I'm hearing from you. And at the same time, that is the secret sauce that's going to enable us to communicate and relate so that we can bridge the gap and also be able to move in the yin and yang of me and we, the individual and the collective, right?
Yes.
And that's only possible through the lens of love. Now, let's get a little more practical, Sarah. Now we're going to use a little more head, maybe a little less heart, but doesn't matter, right? You know the dance. So what does that look like for a young next gen, right? When they come to you, I know you're working with farmers in Australia and you have the two generations and there's succession going on, as you shared in your last conversation. How are you arming, or how are you coaching the next gen to have that conversation that seem unrelatable by the older gen?
The first thing is, and this is a very difficult thing to do, but it's really important, we need to be able to listen. This is either generation. We actually need to listen. When we get onto that wanting to control or wanting to be right, we stop listening to the other person. And that's instantly, there's no love there because there's a rejection. So it's really important to actually listen and to calm yourself down. This is literally often calming yourself down in family situations where you feel furious because your mother or your father or whoever it is doesn't understand what you're saying and they're not listening, and they know that they're right. They absolutely know they're right because they've got so much experience to prove it. And this is the difficult thing where there's a lot of success, is that success proves that you know what you're doing, but you know that you're right as well, because you know that there's something that they're not seeing, and maybe they can't see it. There've been times even, with my own family where I've realized they can't see some of the things I can see. My parents couldn't see some things because we're a different generation. But whatever that may be, if you can't listen to somebody, why on earth should they listen to you, first of all? And if you don't listen to somebody, the likelihood is they won't listen to you. And you learn this in sales, and I see this all the time in business. If you're not willing to listen to somebody who might buy something from you, very often, even if they want it, they don't buy it. Yeah. But if you listen to them, it's really interesting how willing they are to listen to you. This is such a simple, fundamental human thing. And love belongs in sales as much as it belongs in business, as in families, as in money. All of this, it's the same principle. But this is something, it's hard to do, but it's possible to do, is to say, I'm going to listen first. And I'm going to let whoever it is talk, and I'm going to listen with an intention to understand them. I'm going to try to see their perspective, not only my perspective. And if I see their perspective as well as my perspective, I'm richer as a human being than if I only see my perspective, or if I only see my generation's perspective. If I can understand another group of people and how they think and how they view things, I've actually enriched my own experience of life. So there's tremendous value for you as a next gen to cultivate the skill of listening. It will probably be one of the most useful skills you ever have. The fascinating thing is that when you do that, it's amazing. There comes a point in the conversation where the other person relaxes and they suddenly start to say, oh, what about you? What do you think? Tell me. They get interested in what you're thinking, which is exactly what you've been fighting for when you're in that, no, I'm right, you don't understand kind of position. So this is a really simple, practical thing.
So as the next gen, what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say, is that if I learn to listen, to genuinely listen, and to bring in, and I love that concept that you just brought, where that I'm enriching myself by adding more perspectives, more possibility by listening and to your approach or your way, right? And as I do, I actually invite them to want to listen to you and what you have to say without even asking. You're actually being invited. And it's very interesting because, every time I quarantine, I go through some very, I don't want to call it challenging, but some tough, work that I do with some of my masters. And one of the things they've invited me to do now is that by default, right, to not wear the hat of the head. So now the default is no hat. That means you're not coming from a head space, to continuously be in a heart space and just listen. And only when asked or when needed for worldly things, right, which is managing companies or whatever, you put the hat on. Because at present or previously, the hat was the default, and removing the hat, which was, let's say, to have the conversation you're referring to, was the exception. And they're saying, flip it. Because once you flip it, you're no longer trying to find solutions or trying to gauge right, wrong, good, bad, better, worse, faster, more efficient, blah, blah, blah. And he said that energetic machine that's running, like you said, is shutting people down. And they're no longer willing to ask you your perspective because they feel they're not being seen, they're not being heard, they're not being acknowledged. And as a result, they just shut down.
And you might think that you're seeing and hearing and acknowledging people,
Yes.
but what you think and what they experience might be different things.
Exactly.
And it might be their past that is making them feel unacknowledged. And it's really their thing if they feel that, but it affects you.
Yes.
And so it's your thing as well. So we can apply a whole lot of different lenses here, and we can protect our ego and our control in this situation. But actually the way that I see it is, I'm a human being, you're a human being. That's what we are first and foremost. And whether I'm at work or at home or anywhere else, I'm a human being. And if I put the human in the center of it, that human being can work, can make decisions, can love, can connect, can relate, can listen to somebody who needs acknowledgement, even if you don't think they need acknowledgement, or you think they get enough acknowledgement. But you can listen in a way that you don't need to acknowledge them anymore because they feel heard. And then you've solved the problem at a double level. And that's by giving up my rightness and creating space for it's like a different kind of rightness that is shared.
No, but that's the thing, right? That having that, using your inner genius of having speed, of having solution, of being able to see around the corner. Like you said, I could see what my parents couldn't see. And you think that's actually a gift, when actually because of that, they're shutting down. So you may think you're doing the right thing, which is what I felt.
But it is a gift.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's a gift that's not working in this circumstance because they feel that they're not being heard or seen or acknowledged because you're in another space or another, vertical, right? So
that's right.
This is something, I'm telling you, this is the last 4 weeks I'm working on this, and it's amazing that we're having this conversation. No, because, you're present, and they're like, yeah, you are present, Feisal. You're engaged. You have amazing energy at the space, but the energy is too high here. And it's here too, but here it's way too much. So if you take that hat off, then it's all here. And when
I sometimes think of the mind, I think of the mind as an articulator. I think of an articulated truck, and the bit that articulates them is this tiny bit that connects two huge, great things. Okay. And the mind is unbelievably useful in its ability to articulate and clarify and express and pass that on to things. So to clarify the decision. But in my experience, and this is true also in business, that so much of the sourcing of that information is actually much more intuitive than perhaps people give credit for. But we have many subtle abilities to intuit, to source information, not only from data, not only from other people, but from the energy. Let's just say from the energy, or whatever, however you want to put it. And this is stronger probably usually in younger generations. It's getting stronger, I think, as the generations move through. So we use that, and the mind can articulate that beautifully. But if the mind comes in too soon, it actually shuts us off from all the subtle information that we can receive. So it makes us less capable. It reduces our capacity rather than increasing it. And I worked with somebody once he used to do a lot of kind of testing of things. He would have questions that he would test. Is this true or not true? Okay. When he tested, and it doesn't mean it's true, it was just what he tested. Yeah. He said that we should be 1% mind, 75% heart. Wow. And then, 75. And then that leaves, 34% soul.
Soul. Okay.
Soul. Yeah. So you can make of that whatever you want, but it's an interesting thing just because of the numbers. So you might imagine the soul would be the biggest thing. Or if you're a very mental person, you would say, well, the mind is far more important than the heart. Yeah. And whether it's precise or not, it's very interesting to think about it. Like, what would happen if I put things that way around? Would I be a better person for it? Would I make better decisions? For me, a lot of this comes to wisdom. I feel when the heart is engaged, and even better when the soul is alive and awake. The soul, if I put it in a really simple, non-religious kind of way, for me, it's the aliveness, it's the essence of who you are. It's that kind of wild inner person that's you, that longs to express itself in human life, and that has chosen to be here. If that's alive, the soul is alive. I often talk with people about taking your soul to work with you, because it feels a lot of people leave their soul at the door and they walk into a role.
Okay.
And your heart leads, because your heart makes better decisions, and your head follows and articulates and clarifies and brings precision.
Okay.
And expresses in words and sentences and documents and all those things that give shape and form to things and enable decisions to be made. Then we lead with wisdom rather than intellect or even experience. And wisdom is a much better place to lead from than just from the head.
But it's funny, as you said, the 1%, it's interesting because we always say 1% ideation, 99% execution, right? And you're bringing the mind as 1%, and then the rest is heart and soul. So is it the heart and the soul that executes, and the mind just is the ideator? But on the other hand, you're saying it's the articulator, which is the clarifier, or the
yeah.
So I'm just trying to bring the business side to this, to just
I'll give
wrap my head around what you're saying.
I'll give a little framework to this, which might help. If you think about power, because in many ways business is about power. Physical power is the power we used to use predominantly in work, and people would work physically. Then we started to develop much more mental power, which meant we created machines and systems and all these kinds of things, much more powerful than physical power. But more powerful than that is what we could call emotional power, which is really the power of love. And the way that I see this, and it's very hard to see in many business contexts, but we've done a lot of experiments with this in my business and with my clients. If somebody is in a meeting, for example, and they bring love to that meeting, and I've done this many times myself, and I may or may not be active in the meeting. I may be talking and presenting or doing whatever, or maybe not so much. When you bring love into the meeting, it is quite extraordinary how people coalesce, how they start to cooperate with each other, and how the right things come out of it, sometimes really by surprise. If you keep it at the mental level, there's a lot that can be done. It's more complicated. It takes longer, but everybody can see what's going on. The mental level is noisy, and you can show yourself.
And complex.
The tricky bit about this love piece is that it doesn't show very much because it comes more from inside. So you have to really let go of that ego stuff. It's not about how, I always say to myself, it's not about, can everybody see me? And does everybody think I'm great? Does the right decision get made? And the right, I always come back to wisdom. Is that the right, not just for the rational situation here, but for the bigger situation? Is it taking account of the further in the future? Is it taking account of the people, all the people affected? Or are we just trying to close down on a decision because we've got to make one? So if we can make a more expanded decision, love supports wise decisions to be made more quickly, more efficiently, actually, much more efficiently, partly because it's much quicker, partly because it can take account of a bigger picture than the mind. But to do that, you have to be willing not to show so much. And that's why there's a certain kind of femininity in that power. It's difficult. It's difficult, and many women sacrifice it. Women in business sacrifice it by going too much the other way. If they could only know, because they can sometimes access that a little more easily, they could only know what power they could bring, as long as they don't have to fight to show up.
I used
and
to be shunned.
We can go to
be
spiritual power
when,
beyond that, which is even bigger. But love is the place to be.
I mean, when there were women leadership conferences, and I would mention what you just mentioned about them showing up in the manner you just mentioned, I would be shunned by being told, you don't know what it feels like to be a woman in the boardroom. You have no idea. And, because you're trying to play a game that they're playing rather than playing a game that they don't know how to play. So when we ran businesses, we played by our own rules. Therefore, they competed but didn't compete. And when I nudged some of the women at the time, they pushed back and said, you don't understand. And of course, I'm not going to push forward. So coming back now,
But
if
can,
I'm
can
the
I
older,
can I just say something
Yeah,
about that? There's
please.
something really important, and this is where women also need to give up their ego, because there is that thing about the fight and playing the game that's being played. If the reason why I said that thing about if your focus is on a good decision being made rather than being seen to be the one who made the decision, or getting the promotion, or whatever it is that you need to satisfy your ego, if you can let go of that and really put yourself, as we all need to in a way, in the service of what you're doing, and the service to life and the service to people that is, because business is always that, then you can do it. But if you put yourself in the fight, then you can't do that.
No, I agree. So as a next gen, but also an older gen, right? When you say we make decisions from love and from the heart, which impacts society, impacts the greater good, a lot of the older gen would say, where's the limit? Right? Because we need to define at some point where the limit is. Now, of course, the next gen would say, yeah, but it's limitless. Well, resources aren't limitless, right? Intentions are limitless, right? Possibilities are limitless. But at the end of the day, the older gen would say, well, our resources are limited. We can only do so much. So how do you have that conversation?
The first thing I think that's really important for the younger generation is to recognize that if they want to be successful with their beautiful vision, they've actually got to make it work. It's got to work in the real world. And very often that limitless and beautiful visionary thinking hasn't got to the real world yet. It hasn't faced the gritty reality of money and resources and people and relationships and all the stuff that makes business much more challenging than an idea. So, and if we don't, this is again where we come back to the beginning, this bringing the two together. If we could get something where those values and those ideas are made successful in the real world, then we've got a really beautiful situation emerging. I think that the next generation has to embrace the reality part, especially people who are more visionary. And I can't say to you, and no one can say to you exactly how you're going to turn your idea into reality. But I tell you that if you listen to your parents or the older generation and learn how they did it, you may not copy them, but you will learn something about what it takes to actually create something for real that works, that is successful. Because if you have a beautiful idea and you can only do it at a very small scale, that's a very small, beautiful idea. And many people these days have ideas that are world-changing, but without the capacity to actually change the world with your idea, which takes an enormous mastery of resources and money and people and all the skills that go into business, you will end up frustrated. And your parents will say, I told you so. And nobody will be happy. It's like, we don't want that. I don't want your parents to say, I told you so. I want them to say, oh my goodness, I really respect what you've done.
Yeah, because the thing is that the older gen always wants to see the rubber meet the road, right? So where does the ideation meet execution, right? And show me in small intervals or small steps that you can actually make something happen at a smaller scale. Then we will invest at a bigger and bigger level, right? And I think what you said is beautiful, is that, you know, what's got us here will not get us there, but at least let's learn how we got here and celebrate how we got here and take the wisdom and the expertise that got us here and see how we can leverage that to do something different, maybe more impactful, maybe more, you know, grander, or whatever the word is, right? But at least let's not wash away that, you know, generations of work, because it did work and it did get us here, right?
And it is the foundation. Yes. It's the foundation on which we stand. I'd like to give you an example. I don't have that intergenerational and business kind of thing, because I would have done but my grandfather kind of broke the line with my mother and she went off to be an artist. So,
okay.
But I have tried the visionary, beautiful, limitless kind of way of doing business. And it's really difficult to make it grow. So I've had the experience of doing really beautiful work, and I know that it is, and I see in the results that people get, and it means a tremendous amount to them, and it's world changing in many ways in the way that we've worked together. But it's small, and for a few years now I've been working with somebody who thinks very differently from me, and how to build a business that brings those kinds of values to meet the mainstream financial markets. And that's where it gets really interesting, because if you can do that, if you can bring the values that are important to the mainstream and get those two to talk with each other or to work with each other, then you bridge the generations, you use the power that exists in the world to help move forward into a better world. You actually get that kind of next level solution. I haven't seen anybody, I meet a lot of people who are world changing, and they're very, very brilliant. They use their heads a lot. They are not succeeding because they don't engage with business. Okay. They don't want to do business in a proper business-like way. And I totally relate to them, because that would be me. Except that I thankfully have been taught that you actually have to think differently, and you have to embrace reality. And that doesn't mean sacrificing your values. It means standing up for them twice as strongly as you would otherwise. It makes you stronger and better.
But partnering with someone, or with maybe the older gen, to leverage the foundation that you just mentioned, right? To be able to springboard. Yeah. Into the
I think the key is about meeting the requirements for success. Yeah. However you do that, whether you actually work, whether you can work in partnership with the older generation, or you can get them to invest, but invest at a level where they feel comfortable, rather than they just abandon and give up and just hope that you're going to be okay and watch you fail. Like, no parent wants to do that, and it's a real risk. And I know many people who have tried investing in impact businesses or conscious businesses, and they've lost over and over and over again because people wanted to do beautiful things, but they couldn't come through on the business side. Business is business. You can do it beautifully. You can do it with values, and you don't have to be a really horrible person. You don't have to be the person that you might think you have to be. But if you want to do it differently, you have to be strong, and you have to be really, really willing to, it's almost it's a fight for what you believe in, rather than be weak around it. You must be strong.
Exactly. I mean, when, to be able to transform lives, it's about leveraging the strengths of that greediness or that negotiation skill at a harder level or a stronger level, because you're demanding a lot more than normal, right? So it's actually sharpening the pencil or the pen more than before, right? So we have to be even better or more skilled, right? So I want to take a step back. So I love I know it sounds very basic, but I think it's very important to remind ourselves of this bridge. But I want to take a step back to this listening to understand and speaking to be understood. Can we unpack that a little more, right? That I'm sitting there trying to listen, right? What can I do when I start getting triggered, right? Or when I start feeling like I'm about to react or be like, oh, you got to be kidding me, right? Are there things that you recommend, or that, I mean, I know we can talk about breathing, but what do you recommend that if I start getting triggered as you say something, what options do I have that you may recommend for me to do?
I think the thing to be most aware of is that if you're triggered, nothing that you say or think is of value anymore. So trying to stand there and speak from your place of being triggered is a complete waste of time. You've lost control of yourself for a start. You've lost your perspective on life in that moment of being triggered. You're actually being triggered by something that's very hidden inside you. You have no idea what it is. I've worked a huge amount with this. And therefore, and what you think in that moment is so irrational, whatever it is, if you are triggered, There is nothing that you can say or think in that situation that is going to offer any value to another person. So honestly, I recommend you walk away, take responsibility. Don't walk away and say, and leave it all with them, like you're blaming them. It's your responsibility. It's your trigger. It's your stuff. And you must take responsibility. And you, if necessary, you just have to say, I'm sorry, I need to take a break, or I need to get away. I'm feeling triggered. That would be the best thing, is I'm feeling triggered. There's nothing I can say right now. Let me come back and let's continue this conversation later. Now, can I get a little bit into the deeper space with this?
Of course.
I think it's important.
I mean, you're asking for time out because it's happened to me many times, right? Where
I'm
getting triggered, I'm being quote unquote pushed or forced to stay on the table, right? And it's of no value, but you got to hear me out. You got to hear me out. And I'm out of my league, right? Which in a business meeting would never happen. Okay. I would just, you can hammer me as hard as you want. But when it comes in a relational, like family, it's a different ballgame. It's like, I don't know, I start to drown. So I'm asking, what do we do when we're in that situation?
Well, I still, what I said, even if you have to stay there because you can't walk away, you still need to know that whatever you're going to contribute, if you're triggered, doesn't have value. So don't fight back.
Okay.
First thing, just don't fight with it. If you have to stay there, breathe. Yes, actually breathe and listen as much as you can, which you won't, because your mind will be firing like crazy and you won't hear anything. So you really you have to admit that you're just pretending then.
Okay. So
you're not offering any value.
So you're just there as a body.
You're there as a body.
Okay.
Yeah, and you're there probably because you feel some pressure that you can't walk away, which you probably could, or you probably could. But I think the important thing about triggers is to understand what they are and how they come up, and a little bit at least point the direction to how you resolve it, so you're never in that situation again.
Yeah, so
that's what's interesting as you deal with your triggers.
Right? Yeah, I said you wanted to unpack
that. Yeah, I'll unpack that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So we get triggered in relationships because of something that is very suppressed or repressed inside us. It's really interesting, actually. What I've found is that we all, I'm just trying to find the kind of easy way into this. So the first thing to understand is that trigger happens because of your energy. It's not because of the other person. It's because of you. And it is actually a reflection of your energy. So it's a reflection of you and who you are. So how do we unpack that? How do I know when somebody says something that just makes me scream inside and doesn't seem to have anything to do with me? How could I figure out that that's something to do with me? And the fundamental principle that I've found, and I've done a huge amount of work on this, both for myself and with thousands of clients, literally, is that we all have ways in which we hide and repress and suppress our true self.
Okay.
And I think everybody knows that. Everybody knows that there are ways in which you don't let yourself really be who you are. You control yourself, you cover yourself up, you hide yourself. And there are many reasons for that. And they may go back even before this lifetime, depending on what you believe. So there's no point in blaming yourself for the way you're made. You're made the way you are.
Okay.
And there are ways in which you hide yourself, but somehow in life it seems that the purpose is to come here and bring your full self to life.
Yeah.
So when you get triggered, you're actually getting triggered essentially by a behavior that is your behavior. And I'll show you how this works. So let me give you a really simple example. Let's say your father never stops criticizing you. And he's relentless about it. And he's always finding fault with you. And it doesn't matter what you do. You can do everything that you think he wants or everything that feels good to you, but he still criticizes you. And you can't understand, and it drives you crazy. Okay. And it looks like it's all him. And you can say he's a this, he's a narcissist, or he's a this, or he's a that. That's what we see these days, is we put these labels. It's then his fault and I'm not to blame. And so no one's to blame here. But I will guarantee that if you look inside yourself, you criticize yourself relentlessly. And if you really look,
So it's a mirror.
It's a mirror, but it's a deep mirror. It's not a shallow mirror.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is most people think, well, I don't go and criticize other people all the time. I'm not like my father. I don't do that, because they're trying really hard to be a good, kind person who doesn't criticize people, because they hate that criticism. But what happens is they turn it inwards and they turn it towards themselves. Sometimes it's very internal, but they will criticize themselves in exactly, and I mean precisely, the way that their father criticizes them. And when you see that clearly, and it takes deep work, you can't do this mentally. This is not like, oh yeah, I get it. My father criticizes me, I criticize myself. You actually have to recognize from deep inside yourself what that's doing to you. That barrage, that relentless criticism, that commentary in your mind that hardly lets you breathe, because it's always got a comment. It's always finding what's wrong. It's always finding something to speak to you about. When you see what that's doing to you, and you just see it really clearly, like, oh my goodness, I would never, ever do that to another person.
Yeah.
It's not okay to do to yourself what you would never do to another person. It is not okay. This is a generational thing. The older generation actually don't really have that understanding. It was okay for them to sacrifice themselves. That was built into their generation, and they may never understand. It's not okay to sacrifice yourself. It's not okay to destroy yourself from the inside, because you're a piece of life. You're just like everybody else, and you're as precious and valuable and beautiful and lovable as every other piece of life. We may not get the older generation to really get there. This is an evolutionary thing. Yeah. But if you can understand that and actually allow the space for yourself to live and breathe and be a whole human being, your parents will change the way they are around you. They may not fully understand you, but they will listen, they will respect you, and they will understand you in a way that they haven't before.
Okay, so we spoke about a parent, a father, and let's say, like you were giving an example, a father and myself. So what about an intimate relationship with a partner? Does that still apply? That, because I know they always say they're a mirror of what's really going on. So what I'm hearing is if your partner is getting upset and screaming or doing something that they normally wouldn't do and that you would never experience with anybody else, are you telling me that's a mirror of what you're doing to yourself internally, deep down inside?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a gift. It's a real gift. If you know how to work with that, and it's not something I can easily explain in a webinar, it is deep work. Yeah. But I've given you the principle and the essence of it. I mean, I've experienced this so much. It's the way that I wouldn't be married now if I didn't know this stuff, honestly. The thing is, the gift is that person is actually really, when you start to understand it, they're showing you something in yourself that needs to be seen. Because if you carry on your life without seeing that, without recognizing what you're doing to yourself, the way you're hurting yourself, literally, and hiding who you really are, your life will get more and more and more difficult or more and more painful. So the people who trigger us the most are the people who give us the gift of seeing ourselves. And it's just sad because most people don't really understand this, and they don't know they just don't know what to do with that. And so they scream, or they fight, or they run away. They have different things to do, but they never resolve it. And in about an hour, like, we have lots of these patterns, but in an hour or so, you can resolve one of those patterns entirely forever. It will not be your issue anymore. And I've seen people turn around relationships in 24 hours that have never been good their entire life. Literally, like a daughter and her mother. Her mother had never in her life been anything close to a good mother and had ignored her. And I mean, it was a horrible relationship. Within 24 hours, they were talking to each other like human beings who acknowledged each other. And it's simply because the daughter, who felt like she was the aggrieved one, saw what she was doing to herself. And it's really beautiful, beautiful work.
So let me ask you, I mean, I'm moving through this experience as we're speaking, right? Where let's say we have agreements on boundaries, right? So example, no screaming or no swearing or whatever we agree to, right? And so those boundaries are agreements, quote unquote, right? Now, the thing is that for some, those become rules that we live by. And what I've been asked now is that you need to contextualize them and use them as principles and not as rules, because they will be broken or will be crossed in circumstance. So therefore, if you contextualize, right, you will then no longer react when the line is crossed, right? But when I have this conversation with some people, they say, but then where's the limit? Right. So
well, that's why I would prefer to do that work. Like if it happens, it happens. And you can have agreements, and agreements do get broken because we're human. And sometimes we don't know why, you know, let's say it's me who breaks that boundary rather than the other person. And I don't know why it was that I did that. And I wasn't in control of myself at the time. Some of the roots of these triggers are so deep that you have no idea what's going on, but you can find out. So I think we have to accept, like, somebody breaks the boundaries all the time, that's a different issue. But if it gets stepped over, and that's the kind of circumstance, for me as a human being, I have to be able to access forgiveness and all of those things, and find, in terms of contextualization, that helps you to manage the moment. But for me, I need to do the deep work that enables me to free myself from being triggered. But that comes afterwards.
Yeah. But I'm saying in the moment, they're saying,
in the moment,
even though the other person says, this is the agreement, this is the rule we live with, they're saying you take it as a principle and contextualize it and know that it will be crossed, and just say, okay, there must be something very deep going on for that person that you love so dearly to respond in a manner that crosses the line. That means something is very deeply painful. Otherwise, why would
and it's
they...
not you.
Yes.
It's not about you, it's about them. That's their stuff. If you're triggered by their trigger, if you freak out because they've screamed, so you're triggered too, that's your stuff.
Yeah. I'm saying double, but right? It's a double whammy.
And it's a double whammy. You've got your stuff, they've got their stuff. And of course, there's a whole lot of reactivity going on there. That's a kind of chemical reaction and an explosion. But, you know, we're humans. We can sit down together and say, we didn't mean to do that, and unpack it. That's what, to me, those are the moments that actually, again, there's tension. That's what grows a relationship, is the way you recover from that. That's what it evolves a relationship and brings out new depths and greater love as the relationship matures. Otherwise, we live in the paradigm, you know, that we've grown up in with films where, you know, the romance at the beginning was the best bit of the whole relationship, which is a ridiculous paradigm, but it's very prevalent. But if actually you see that with every time of tension that you pass through, your relationship gets enriched because you can bring love to it, and you learn another perspective, and you learn something about yourself, and you become more of yourself. So you become more of who you are, more fully human. Then that's worth having those moments of tension. That's gold.
But I think, I mean, some people may not have a support system to help unpack some of those triggers, right? I mean, we are privileged to have that kind of support, but many don't. And then it gets very challenging, or many are not open to unpack that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not open, that's hard. I think these days, there are books available that can teach these things at different levels of financial access. People can get it. So the barriers are that you may not know, just simply not knowing that it's possible. I think that's the biggest barrier, is just the lack of knowledge. People don't know. They don't know anything about what we're talking about here. And then they don't even know that it's something to look for. I remember meeting somebody who said the problem that coaches have is the people who know they need a coach have one, and the rest of them don't know they don't need a coach, so they don't know they need a coach, so they don't go looking for one. So coaches have this terrible marketing problem, and that's really spot on. And therefore, it's for those of us who work in that field, it's up to us to make more and more people aware that there are solutions to these things. You don't have to live in that kind of agony of not knowing how to deal with emotional triggers.
Yeah, but I think I'd love for people to just hear again that a lifetime or a very long piece of suffering, right, can be flipped in a 1-hour conversation. When I was with someone the other day, and they said, they actually used the word that you are using ruthless efficiency to resolve an issue. Right. And you just mentioned it, because I also proposed that some of our experts are able to, in a 60-minute session, reframe something that has been not serving them for a lifetime, because they relook at that belief, that pattern, that state or that occurrence from a different lens. And once they reframe it, everything changes from that moment on. And it was just funny to hear. And of course, they chuckled because they took it back. They said, "No, Face, I didn't mean to say ruthless," but but I agree with you, because it's effective and it's efficient. And why not? If you can do it in 60 minutes, why would you take 3 months? Go ahead.
And that's the power of love for me. The ruthlessness of love is that love stands for a better solution, and it's better for everybody. It stands for everybody wins.
Yes.
And so it's unbelievably efficient. That's why I brought it into the board meetings, the business meetings. It is unbelievably efficient.
Yeah.
It's just a question of, can we remember to do it? We don't have to be good at it, but this is a really useful thing I think about love. You don't have to be good at it.
Okay.
You don't have to feel it. If you're in a board meeting, you don't have to sit there and beam and feel like this soft, gooey feeling for everybody. Okay. There's something about an intention to bring love into a situation that changes it. So I've come to the recognition that love is an action much more than it's a feeling. The feeling follows the action. Okay. When you see everyone, if there's tension in the boardroom and everybody, or at home, and that melts and a beautiful solution comes out, wow, there's a very nice feeling that goes with that. And we can call that love. But the love is actually the action that you took to bring a different energy or a different approach into the situation.
Okay, beautiful. Sarah, we're coming close to the end. So first, we talked about listening and really listening to understand, right? And which then creates this willingness from the other side to hear us out. And then I'm hearing that a lot of opportunity, a lot of growth, the word is used a lot, but opportunity comes from that tension. But from that tension, bringing love, like you said now, as an action into that space to be able to move forward and to dissolve the need to be right, the need, that ego piece, right? And then of course, the gift, whether it's a parent, a loved one, or an intimate relationship, of something that's being reflected that we are doing unto ourselves that we may not recognize at a very, very deep level, right? And so those are the three things that I'm hearing. And then bringing, like you said, love into the boardroom or into a conversation without being gooey and mushy and all the things that we presume they are, right? And then also at the end, talking about the practicality of that large ideology, right? And leveraging the foundation that has been created by the older gen or by people of the past, because some are not part of family businesses and they just are starting, right? But there is still a foundation laid by those before us. They may not be family members, but so as a summary in the last few words, what are something that maybe you didn't touch upon that you'd like to share? I mean, we have time and we will make time. What is there anything we didn't touch on, or something you'd like to repeat or reaffirm? Or
well, there's something that's really simple and I think is hugely undervalued. Yeah. And it's possibly the foundation of all of this, which is simply the word relaxation. I always teach people to relax about money
Okay.
And that would apply at any level of success. People are usually not very relaxed about it. The thing about relaxation is it softens you and it enables you at an energy level to receive more energy. And that energy that you receive when you're relaxed is what we call, in the Chinese master kind of language, fresh energy, which is the energy that you want. Okay. And what I've found is that it doesn't matter, like I've been doing this stuff for more than 30 years now, it doesn't matter what I face in life. And I've had some pretty challenging situations. Relaxation is really the beginning, the middle, and the end of it. And all these other things, the way I talked about being able to resolve triggers and things, is a way to bring you to a deep relaxation inside yourself around something that before was making you exceptionally stressed. And I've heard spiritual masters also talk about when, a spiritual master who thinks he's enlightened and then loses everything, lost his wife, lost all his clients, lost his lineage, was stripped of everything. The only thing that he came to in the end was relaxation, was being able to relax. And I agree. I feel that the ability to relax, really relax from the inside in any situation and open yourself to be able to access something new, which is what happens when you relax, is the simplest, most foundational practice for all of our life, for any situation that we will ever face, for any decision we will ever need to make, for any challenge that will be put in front of us, and just for living. And it doesn't mean never experience stress. It means in every stress, the first thing to do is to relax.
Wow. Beautiful, Sarah. Beautiful. Thank you very much for that. Just one last thing. Is there something you want to share on the short video I'm going to share that you wrote about, the relationship and money? Is there something you want to add to that? Because that relaxation is very much a part of that, because through that relaxation, that relationship with money and how money is, is part of us and wants to be loved and wants to be respected. Is there something you want to add to that, so that as they listen, they can reflect on your words of wisdom?
Probably they'll listen to it after the interview. Is that how you would expect it? It'll be the next thing. So it'll be what you go through now.
There. It could be before, after.
It'll be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you listen to it, it says at the beginning, this is what money would like to say to you. I just want to encourage you to take it really personally and to listen to it with your heart. Allow yourself to receive what's in there. Allow yourself to be surprised, which you will be for sure, and see what resonates with you. And what I've seen when people listen to that recording and when they read that first chapter of the book is that it changes something in your essence and in your understanding of what money is in a way that will be changed forever. And it's a beautiful change. It's a change for the better for you, and it's a change for the better for humanity. So open your heart to it and receive something from it, because you'll be thankful for that.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, when I listened to it, I said to myself, I wish that somebody had shared that with me when I was much younger, right? Because of all the images, the connotations, the assumptions that are made about money, right? Rather than having look at it, the perception that you share in the short video. So thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you for taking the time from your holiday. Thank you for the incredible sharings that you've done. And so we will share the short video, the link to your book, and of course, this webinar. And so once again, thank you. I wish you a beautiful rest of your holiday, and we'll be speaking to you soon on a one-to-one level.